one of the major statement he has given in Hyderabad Literature Festival that one of the most specific error in Gujarati literature that Gandhi is not favoring the Gujarati literature, but Gujarati literature favoring the Gandhi by Hind Swaraj and the other writings which is done in Gujarati language. Like we all nourished our mother tongue for the long tradition towards the India or our our own continent. So yeah, this is actually beautiful, sir.
Yes, so you get a sense of historical progression of Gujarati literature, similar to English literary history, right? But how different it is. So that's what you get a sense of, right? So you get to learn Gujarati literary history in a nutshell almost. Gujarati literary history, which is far older than English literary history, right? Because in Gujarat, English literary history begins with Chaucer in 15th century, if I'm not mistaken. But it is in 11th or 12th century you get Hemchandracharya. Its 15th century contemporary of Chaucer is Narsi Mehta. Right, and Narsi Mehta is not printed like Chaucer is. He is orally transmitted by people. So Gujarati literature was owned by Gujarati people substantially through their memory, something which English people did not do because they had printing press. They did not have to remember Chaucer by heart to transmit Chaucer from one generation to another. वो printing कर लेता था. किताब Chaucer की थी, which the other generation could read. But Narsi was memorized. Right? So Narsi Mehta is part of memory even today. He is part of Gujarati memory. Chaucer is mostly an academic subject. So British people won't be able to cite Chaucer orally. They will have to study it in the book. Right? But you will find many Gujarati people who are able to sing Narsi Mehta, perform Narsi Mehta. So that's the difference between two literary traditions. And given the fact that the whole category called literature is in the West is around print technology, we have to broaden our understanding of literature to look at Gujarati literary history. Right? We have to look at the orality of it, as well as the handwritten manuscript culture to which Jain literary texts belong. Right? Okay, anything else that you want to say?
Sir, I have a doubt, like not regarding this conversation,
Hmm.
but the other day when we were discussing about digital humanities, you said that after 70 years, the copyright is removed. So
Hmm.
is it for traditional publishing or is it for self-publishing? Because these days the self-publishing concept is very much evolved. पहले ये था कि लिखा and then they do the print and or the author takes the order and everything. But now there are self-publishing houses as well. So that copyright thing was for traditional publishers or was it for self-publishing platforms as well?
Both.
Is it for both? Like also,
I die 70 years after my death, my books will be part of public property. I won't own them.
but
Yeah. Ownership doesn't remain with my family, even if I have self-published them.
okay. But if the author does the paperwork that कि मेरे मरने के बाद the copyright will be given to my family or whomsoever it may concern, then
I'm not sure. Even then, means suppose I have written in my will that the copyright for my works will remain in my family. 70 years out of after my death, it no longer remains part of my family. Something that happened in case of Rabindranath Tagore recently. Nobody, the Shanti Niketan, his trust which held the copyright no longer holds it, so even you can publish his works today. Sehzal can bring out a book on by Tagore.
Okay, got it. Because they, I started reading Chandrakanta recently, and uske copyright में it was written like edition 2020, and the preface was probably by the publisher itself, and on the next page it was something from it wrote Pratham Sanskaran से ऐसे करके, and it was written by Khatri himself, Devkinandan Khatri himself. So that question, yeah. Also, it had so many mistakes. Even देवकीनंदन खत्री wrote in his preface that ये मेरा पहला ग्रंथ है, ये आगे और छप रहा है, so if आपको कुछ भी mistakes दिखे, so you can just write a letter to me this thing. So I was reading it,
and sometimes they used to print something called errata. Errata means जो mistakes है उसका एक sheet में देते थे, please read this instead of that, ऐसे. So that was a convention that was followed in those days. Even in English, it is an English convention, yeah. Errata.
Yeah, because when I started reading this, I initially I read like what 5 to 10 pages, and then I saw that there were so many mistakes कि ये edit किया हुआ है ही नहीं, इसको जैसा था वैसे के वैसे डाल दिया है. This is what I felt. ये edit नहीं किया है.
Right. And the problem becomes even more complex when we look at Chaucer, because spellings were not standardized in Shakespeare or Chaucer. They slowly standardized after the founding of Royal Academy of Letters in Britain somewhere in 18th century, 200 years after Shakespeare, right? So the spellings are very arbitrary in Shakespeare. So the recent editors who try to standardize them, so and even Old English would be, and there would be a translation of Middle English into Modern English, and so on and so forth. Now in Indian situation it becomes complicated because Narsi Mehta would not print his books because there was no printing technology, and probably he did not even write anything. He composed his works and it circulated among his followers in oral form, and it was transmitted through generations. Some people would make manuscripts, like maybe after 100 years of his death, the first manuscript of Narsi Mehta was written. Right, so it's a different cultural context. Religion, metaphysics अलग है, politics अलग है, cultural forms अलग है. जैसे रासो is very important Gujarati form with Shitanshu talks about here, right? Raso, and it is a form that is quite common to Rajasthan as well. Page number 571, right? We are talking of Samay Sundar, a great Jain poet. Page 571. Jin Chandra Suri was invited to the Mughal court, right? And along with him, Samay Sundar went to Lahore, where he ably defended the philosophical relativism, Anekantavad of Jainism, and was honored by the Emperor Akbar. Can you see this? Can you see my screen? So he talks here about Raso and Chopai. Now Raso Chopai are very common in North Indian languages as well as in Gujarati. And the first Gujarati literary text is by, what is that? Okay, so your page number 1, you find the history of the title discusses relation between region, language and power and how it has changed, right? So Gujarat was called the place of Gurjars, and Hemchandracharya, Jain monk, wrote the first treatise on poetics called Kavyanushasana. Gujarat Vidyapit was established by Mahatma Gandhi with the idea that all education should be in the provincial languages. And with that, he founded Gujarat Vidyapit in Ahmedabad. How many of you have heard of Gujarat Vidyapit? Okay. So he is discussing 8 centuries of Gujarati literary history from Kavyanushasana by Hemchandracharya to Gujarat Vidyapit. From Gurjar Desh to state of Gujarat, which was formed in 1961. Right? 1960. Yeah, Preeti, you have to say something or what? Okay. So 1960, you have Gujarat as modern state emerging. Before that, it was part of Bombay Presidency, and there was a movement called Maha Gujarat Abhiyan for free independent Gujarat region. Because after independence in 1947, Nehru was reluctant to divide states on the basis of language, because he thought that partition had already caused a lot of terrible disasters, and the country will fall apart if it is divided on linguistic lines. So Nehru was not very keen on implementing it. So there were movements that happened against Nehru government. In Maharashtra, it was called Sanyukta Maharashtra Andolan, and in Gujarat, it was called Maha Gujarat Abhiyan. And Indulal Yagnik was a very important leader, influenced by Gandhi, of course, who agitated for separate Gujarat. So in 1956, you have a bilingual Gujarat state, right, called Gujarat and Maharashtra. And the chief minister was Morarji Bhai Desai, if I'm not mistaken, or Yashwantrao Chavan. And then it was divided in 1960. So Gujarat becomes a separate state in 1960, and Maharashtra becomes a separate state. So what we mean by Gujarat in regional terms is also fluid. 13th century में जिसे गुर्जर देश कहा जाता था और 1960 में गुजरात कहा जाता है, not co-extensive. Right, there is a lot of fluidity around it. So what do we mean by regionality of regional literatures has to be rethought. For example, a lot of Jain monks used to travel extensively in Rajasthan. For example, look at this page number 571. We have Samay Sundar, who would go over to as part of his vihar, Chaturmas, among Jains, the 4-month sojourn during, I think, a rainy season, where the monks go around on kind of pilgrimage vihars, right? So Khambat, he would go to Khambat. He would go to Shatrunjaya Palitana, which is another important destination for the Jains. Lahore, because Lahore was not Pakistan in those days. Khambat, Iladurg, Jaisalmer in Rajasthan, Abu in Rajasthan, Shatrunjaya Ahmedabad, Bikaner, Rajasthan, Nagaur, Rajasthan, Agra in UP, Marot, Multan, both of them in Sindh, Pakistani Sindh, Siddhpur again in Gujarat, Bikaner, Rajasthan, Medata in Rajasthan, Jalore, Rajasthan, Ranakpur, Rajasthan. So there are circuits of travel. The Vihar of Samay Sundara does not coincide with the idea of Gujarat as a region. So can you call Samay Sundar a Gujarati person? Right? So the identity of Gujarati as belonging to a particular region of Gujarat is a modern idea. Something that we have to keep in mind. Does it make sense when I say it's a modern idea? Gujarati as a person who belongs to Gujarat is a modern idea. What do you understand by that? Nice statement.
Sir, it may mean that the division of the provinces according to the languages is a modern idea.
Yes, very true. And that happens with
The division of
states.
the provinces based on languages did not exist. Yes, sir.
So we have to understand regionality historically. So no, we tend to think of region as something which is fixed, right? But region as a cultural unit is fluid. So these regional identities are very modern, and so are the linguistic identities. So a relation between language, region, and literature is historically dynamic one, not a fixed one. So what do you understand by the idea that region is a fluid construct or a historical construct? What do you mean by that?
Sir, it is fluid in the sense that we can easily draw another similar border and call it a separate region, like what happened with Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. It doesn't necessarily mean that they both speak different languages, but
Very
still there is, because of the politics and contention of power, it is very easy to demarcate a border and call it a separate state. It doesn't have to be yeah, right.
Look at Sindh in Pakistan, right? Which was part of Samay Sundar circuit. And today India and Punjab also was divided into two with partition. You have Pakistani Punjab and Indian Punjab. So Pakistani Punjab uses Punjabi language as much as Indian Punjab use Punjabi language, right? Sindh in Pakistan also uses Sindhi language, and Sindhis who migrated to India after partition also use Sindhi language, right? Are there any Sindhis in the class? No? Okay. But that is what, as Rishi says, is historically fluid. So, what was Gurjar Pradesh for Hemchandracharya does not exactly coincide with modern Gujarat after 1960. So, region and power are connected. That's one of the points that Shitanshu is making over here. And Mughals like Akbar were also patrons of Jain literature and philosophy. So, what do you have to say about that? Were you aware of that? How many of you were aware of the fact that the Jaina literature was patronized by Mughals like Akbar? Okay, Khadija is aware. Anyone else? Tasneem is aware, okay. No one else? Preeti is aware, okay. Vibha is aware. Is it Vibha or Vibhi?
Sir, it's Vibha.
Vibha, it's written Vibhi here, so I make a mistake. Okay, so much about Hindu versus Muslim kind of understanding of pre-colonial India, which the British floated, right? And it's extremely inaccurate, as you can see. Okay. Okay, now let's look at 12th century Gujarati Raso, a long narrative poem on battle between Bharteshwar and Bahubali, sons of King Rishabhdeva, who upon renouncing his kingdom attained omniscience or Keval Jnana and became a Tirthankar, one of the founders of the Jain religion. So the poem is called Bharteshwar Bahubali Ghor. Ghor means fierce battle, composed by Vajrasen Suri. Now this is the first important poem in Gujarati. Right? Written by a Jain poet, Vajrasen Suri, who was associated with Tapagacha. Gacha are various, what should I say, schools or centers of Jain monasteries and learning. The second earliest Gujarati available text is also Raso on the same theme by a Jain monk called Shalibhadra Suri, who is a disciple of Vajrasen Suri. But this Vajrasen Suri is not the same as the earlier one. It is called Bharteshwar Bahubali Raso. And this one is called Bharteshwar Bahubali Ghor. Text was composed in 1185. And Shalibhadra belonged to a different Gacha. So these are the oldest genres in Gujarati. Long narrative poems, very often similar to, yeah. Go ahead.
Sir, if I'm not wrong, there was this another genre, right? Phagu Kavyo, belonging to the same period.
Yeah. Phagus are those which celebrate seasons.
Yeah, so yes, so there was like, I remember this one named Jambu Swami Phag.
Yes.
And Neminath Phag also.
Right. And you can see they are Jains, right? Neminath Phagu. So this huge efflorescence of Jain literature in Gujarati is unique. Means you may have something similar in Kannada or Tamil, but and Rajasthani and Gujarati. Okay. So the next text that he talks about, Old Gujarati, or which is called Maru Gurjar or Old Western Rajasthani. So you can see there is an overlap between Rajasthani, Old Rajasthani and Old Gujarati. They are almost similar languages. And Vajrasen's text is what? These are the meters, Chopai meter and Dua meter. Now you can compare it with the iambic pentameters and iambic meters of old heroic poetry in English. So old heroic poetry, Beowulf is the most famous example, right? You have studied that, right? About Old English. What is important here is that Old Gujarati and Old Western Rajasthani and Maru Gurjar are kind of, they fall under the same label, rubric, which again points out that the state of Gujarat and state of Rajasthan being different is another very modern thing. Cultural and historical maps are different from political maps.
Sir, heroic poetry, so what we call Veer Kavya in Gujarati. So that would be, wait,
Similar.
Kanhad De Prabandh, if I'm not wrong. Yes?
Like Balbhadra Bahubali Ghor would be description of a battle, right, between these two brothers of the king, Rishabdev, one of the Tirthankars. So you can see that similarity of heroic narratives, right, long narrative poems, which you can't still call epics, right? But most of the old heroic poetry in English is anonymous. Again, preserved orally, like Narsimha Mehta was preserved orally, or Vedas were preserved orally, till printing emerged in the West. Okay, here is the idea of Dingal. Now, Dingal is a very important tradition related to Charani Sahitya in Saurashtra. And that language is also called Dingal. But it's basically a style of recitation and singing. Have you heard of Dingal or Charani Sahitya? Has anyone heard of it? Yeah, Tasneem, what do you know about it?
Sir, I know a word about dingle is that we usually use this word when someone's dramatically say something and try to narrate something like "Tara dingle bandh kara hai." It means you should stop your dingle.
Right, and it is about the way Charani Sahitya or the Sahitya of bards. Bards, minstrels who used to praise kings, and they used to also maintain genealogies, vamshavalis. They followed this style of narration. Yeah, Preeti.
Yes, sir. So this word, the one which you mentioned, I haven't heard that, but there's a similar word. The word dhinganu, because you said mentioned charan side, right? So
I don't.
that is, I guess something. Yeah. So I asked my mother about it. So that is something similar, and that is used to, uh, narrate all these war incidents dramatically.
I'm not
I
sure
don't
of
know if that's the same, but
etymology
this is what, yeah.
of
So that is the word I've heard, and like the way what's mentioned and what you described, it seemed very similar, but the word is different. Yeah,
I know
something like a
Dinganu.
description same.
Etymology of Dinganu.
Yeah.
Be connected or may not be connected. Maybe you can look up in some etymological dictionaries, Gujarati. Have you heard of etymology? Etymology is how words come about, right? And the oldest etymological book in India is Vyutpatti Shastra. I forget the name. Nirukta by Yask. Nirukta was one of the oldest etymological texts in the world by a person called Yask. So, Vyutpatti Shastra in Gujarati can be looked up. So, this is the old poetics. And Shitanshu says here that Raso was not unknown to poets in Prakrit language. So, in Kualay Mala, composed in Prakrit by Udyotan Suri, another Jain poet at Jalore, in old Gurjar Desh. Right? Jalore was part of old Gurjar Desh. Author uses terms like Rasa and Rasya to signify type of dance accompanied by song. So, you have heard of Ras and Garba, right? How many of you have heard of that? Ras. So you can trace the history of Ras over here to Raso or Rasaka. And you also find similar genres in Apabhransh. Prakruts and Apabhransh are older forms of Indian languages from which the modern Indian languages like Gujarati or Marathi emerge. So, in the classical Sanskrit drama, you will find a person's high caste people speaking Sanskrit, while lower caste people and women using Prakrut. Right? That was the conversational register, everyday register. Sanskrit was a refined register of the elites. And Apabhransh was the corrupt form of language. So there were three forms. But Apabhransh and Prakrut became literary idioms, and there were major literary works composed in Apabhransh and Prakrut. And they would have regional coordinates like Maharashtra Prakrut, or you have a Prakrut near Magadhi, that is Magad in Bihar, and so on. So these became very, what should I say, elevated literary languages. So Apabhransh works on prosody give descriptions of Rasak using various meters like Duha, Rola, Ulal, Rasa, Vastu, Madnavtar, Dumila, which are arranged in Tripadi or 3-unit line, or Panchapadi or Satpadi. Padat is feet in English, right? You know what is a feet in prosody, right? What are the common English feats? Does anyone know? English prosody mein? Which are common English feats? आप नेट स्लेट एग्जाम देने वाले हो या नहीं देने वाले हो? आपको इंग्लिश स्पीच पता नहीं तो कैसे पास होगी? So how many of you are planning to appear for NET, SLET?
Sir, I know only two, that Anapest and AIM.
Anapest and most common feat would be
Yes,
huh?
yes, sir, mostly. Anapest and AIM, and two others are there, but I
Most common
can't forget.
feat कौन सा है? Of man's first disobedience and the fruit of the forbidden tree. Sing, O muse. ये लाइन सुनी है?
Iambic pentameter.
Right. So iambic is the basic, most common. Unstressed stress, and most of English literature is in iambic feet. And iambic feet means a unit of unstressed stress syllables, right? Pentameter is 5 feet. Trimeter is 3 feet. 3 lines is called tercet. And Ode to the West Wind is a very famous poem in tercet, if I am not mistaken. 3 lines poem. Stanza is of 3 lines. So it is like Tripati, 3 lines. And 5 feet wali Panchapadi is like pentameter. Saptapadi is uh, hexameter, heptameter. Hexa would be 6 feet. Okay, that's a bit about prosody. But we come to a very important point over here. On page number 576, right? What Shitanshu is saying, that early Jain scholar poets introduced a new regional literary language, that is Gujarati, to the region. But it was not a new literature of the region, because literature was very much available in the kind of literature these people wrote, the Jain monks, was the same kind that you find in Apabhransh and Prakrit and Sanskrit. So they did not really write new kind of literature. They wrote old kind of literature in Gujarati, a regional language. So it's like old wine in the new bottle. But the new wine came up, according to Shitanshu, is with Narsi Mehta in 15th century to produce new regional literature, right, in new regional language. So what he says, that Narsi Mehta is called Adi Kavi because he is the first Gujarati poet to write Gujarati literature in Gujarati, not Apabhransh or Sanskrit literature in Gujarati. So he is writing Gujarati wine in Gujarati bottle. That's what he says. And that is why he is called Adi Kavi, or the first poet. Now he is not chronologically the first poet, right? He is chronologically coming in 15th century, while the earliest Gujarati poem is what was that? Bhartendu Bahubali Ghor, right, in 12th century, by Jain poets. So Jain poets wrote their stuff which they would have otherwise written in Sanskrit or Apabhransh, but in Gujarati language. So they are not doing anything new, according to Shitanshu. It is only Narsi Mehta who is doing something new in Gujarati, and that's why he is called first Gujarati poet. Jain poets before Narsi Mehta were bilinguals, that they would write in Sanskrit or Prakrit or Gujarati or Apabhransh, right? But with Narsi Mehta comes the strong monolingual Gujarati poetry in the form of Narsi Mehta and later Mitho, who came from lowest caste of Dhadi Dalits, formerly untouchables, and Dhiro in both of them are 19th century. Poets like Narsi and Akho, 17th century, were anxious to mention in their poems that they were not products of Kavi Shiksha, a kind of educational system for the poets, which Jain poets followed, like Kavya Anushasan, that Hemchandracharya wrote, right? So these are the lines from Narsi Mehta. Anything that you have to say about this? How many of you had Gujarati as a subject in your school? Preeti and Rushi. Tasneem, Dehini. So, by any chance, have you studied Narsi Mehta or Akko in your school? Subra.
So in
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so during school में तो था ही sir, like throughout till 12th grade we used to have some
Hmm.
at least one poem or something like that. But I guess I got closer to it because I opted for Gujarati literature as my allied, so that acquainted me
How
with
many of you had
the
Gujarati
levels.
subject
It was
apart from Preeti? Okay. Subra, you had Gujarati? You studied Gujarati in your school? Rushi. Yeah, Rushi, you have to say something? Rushi or Subra,
No,
say
sir, I just
something.
wanted to say that yes, we did have to study Narsi Mehta and Akho Bhagat Nachapa. So I don't remember the contents, but I do remember that we did have the Chappa and Chopai of Akho Bhagat. Yes.
Right. Chappas are it is that genre which is particularly used for social satire. So chappa jo, to like whip. So almost like Kabir, he attacks all the ritualistic hypocrisy under the name of religion. So Akho, right, who was a goldsmith by caste. Now this Bhagat tradition is mostly poets of lower caste or poets who are excommunicated from their caste, like Narsi Mehta, who was though born a Brahmin, was excommunicated from his caste because he used to visit the untouchable quarters and sing of his poetry there. So he was excommunicated. Uh, Akho was a goldsmith, right? So not strictly the upper caste. And Mitho and Dhiro 19th century are untouchables. Preeti, you want to say
Yes, sir.
something?
I
Yeah,
remember that Akho Bhagat would play the matka and sing his.
I think that would be Premanand. He
Right. Sorry.
from Akhyan or the narrative singing tradition, storytelling tradition, which is done by uh, people called man bhatts or people who use that pot or man to beat those pot and sing. And he took Gujarati narrative poetry to whole new levels. And he was popular across Western India, not just in Gujarat. So Premanand, who happens to be from Baroda, right? Vadodara is identified with Premanand in a big way. He so he is the Manbhat tradition, and he is, I think, upper caste because he is Brahmin, and that's why he is allowed to enter the temples and sing to all people who are sitting, right? So it's a recitation. So poetry is not meant to be read as a printed text in your library or in your bedroom, but something that is to be heard, being performed in front of people. So the whole category of literature occupies a different space in society compared to English poetry. So a poem by John Donne would be read by people who admired him in the libraries, right? In isolation. while Premanand or Narsi's poetry would be performed in front of people uh, who would listen to it. So literature was something that was meant to be heard. So it was part of what is known as Shravya Kavya, or literature as a heard phenomenon. So we have to keep on marking these differences. Comparison helps us to contrast. Okay, that's an important point. The next very important writer is Bhalan. And Bhalan, I think, belongs to the same Manabhat tradition. And he adapted Ban's Kadambari, a very famous novel written in Sanskrit, into Gujarati. But his Gujarati Kadambari is more of a narrative katha poem rather than a kind of what should I say, the prose kind of poetry of Ban. Ban was a very famous Sanskrit poet who wrote this novel called Kadambari. But Gujarati adaptation by Bhalan, probably in 13th century or so, is into Akhyan format, right? Kadwa Buddha Akhyan, Katha tradition. Yes, you can see this man or copper pitcher with narrow neck. So Bhalan is one of the important initiators or pioneers of narration, storytelling, poetry as storytelling in the form of Akhyan. According to Shitanshu, he belongs to a different space compared to Narsi, because Narsi Mehta is not somebody who is trained in Kavi Shiksha, a tradition that is Sanskritized learning of poetry, which Bhalan seems to have, right? And he is into court, and he is a court poet. Bhalan is a court poet, and his patrons were Vastupal, the famous minister at Waghela court, right? You might have heard of Vastupal and Tejpal. And in the monolingual literary culture of 12th century Chalukya Gurjar Desh. And he is another very important poem is Nalakhyan, story of Nala Damayanti in Gurjar Bhasha. So literature in Gujarati was produced in court as well as in public, under illiterate public, as in Narsi Mehta, right? So these are the two different sites of literary production that you see emerging since 12th century in Gujarati. And you can see that there is nothing similar in English. Does anyone have to say something about this point? That the sites of production of literature is, one is court of the king or the minister, and second is in public, devotional poetry in public. Okay. Now that brings us to the next important point in the essay, and that is relation between the regional and Sanskrit. Now Sanskrit was a part of what is called Margiya cultural tradition. By Margiya you mean the tradition of the way, which means that right from Afghanistan to Singapore and Java, you would find your readers if you write in Sanskrit. So if somebody composes a poem in Kashmir, a person in Kanyakumari can read it, right? And if a person composes a poem in Sanskrit in Gujarat, a poem, his reader may also be in today's Afghanistan, the Gandhar region of that time. So it is a trans-regional space that Sanskrit occupies. While against this Margiya are the traditions which are specific to the place, called Desi, right? And you will find similar categories in music. You have Margiya traditions of music, and you have Desi traditions which are regional or folk. So Gujarati became a regional counterpart to trans-regional Sanskrit space, right? And scholars like Sheldon Pollock would call it Sanskrit cosmopolis. By cosmopolis, it means these are trans-regional languages. Like English can be understood by a person in Kanyakumari as well as a person in Kashmir, person in Dabhoi as well as person in Manipur. So English is the modern cosmopolitan language. So Sanskrit was a cosmopolitan language in those days, right? So why did people write in the regional language is a question that we need to think about. And Akho, a Vedantic poet of 17th century, says that Sanskrit is studied with the help of Prakrit, that is Gujarati. Just as pieces of wood tied together in a large bunch cannot be used in a stove without untying them, so Sanskrit is of no use without Prakrit. And he goes on to add another metaphor. A merchant can use round figure currency for writing down some accounts, but in actual commercial transaction, you need small change. Right? So that shows the relation between trans-regional, elite, largely upper caste Sanskrit tradition and the regional, which is open to people of all castes and class and gender. Right. So to explain what is written in Sanskrit, you have to use Prakrit. Means if you want to understand Bhagavad Gita, then you have to use Gujarati to understand the Sanskrit text. And the metaphor that he uses is that pieces of wood, if they are tied in large bunch, cannot be used in the stove. You have to open them and then put one piece after another. So that is what Prakrit does, or Gujarati does to Sanskrit. It's like a whole bunch of woods, right, which is to be unpacked, and that unpacking of Sanskrit is done in Gujarati. That's what Akho says. And another metaphor, far more Gujarati, is that a merchant can give currency which is of high denomination. Right, you are carrying 2,000 rupees note in your pocket, but your everyday expenses, if you want to have a cup of tea, you require small change. Right, so Sanskrit is like that big 2,000 rupee note, and Gujarati is like 100 or 10 rupee or 5 rupee note. So what do you have to say about this? This brings us to another extremely important issue of studying literature in India and South Asia, is the idea of vernacularization. If you look at European literatures, and I'm going to stop with this point, last point that I'm making. European literatures, you have a classical paradigm which includes Greek and Latin. Right? So by the time you reach 13th or 14th century, you find emergence of Desi languages, right? Or vernacular language, or language of servants. Vernacular term is used as language of servants. but actually it is language of common people. So Greek and Latin cannot be used for everyday purposes, and you have to use vernacular languages like Latin. From Latin comes Italian, French, English, German, Spanish. All these languages are vernacular languages, right? Desi languages. So if you imagine Indian subcontinent and European subcontinents as a pair, then Greek and Latin occupy this trans-regional space, Margia space. So a person in Britain, London can understand what is written by a person in Greek language, or a person who is based in Italy, because they are using common classical language, that is Latin. Similarly, in India, Sanskrit is that kind of language. But there, from that emerges various Desi languages, the vernacular languages of the regions. So, vernacular languages of United Kingdoms, as they are called today, would be English, Irish, Welsh. These are the Desi bhashas, or indicating regions. So similarly, we have Gujarati, Tamil, not Tamil, Gujarati, Bangla, Punjabi, Hindi, and so on and so forth. So you can see a kind of parallels between the European process of vernacularization that happened in 13th, 14th century, and in 13th, 14th century Gujarat as well. And one of the most famous figures associated with vernacularization in Europe is Dante. How many of you have heard of Dante? Two people. Only two people have heard of Dante. Char. Means only 4 people are awake probably in the class. 5, 6. Okay, what do you know about Dante? Who will tell me? Diotima. What do you know about Dante? Inferno, right? And Paradiso, right? Now these large poems, he says he will write using what he is called illustrious vernacular. Illustrious means that which is elevated. Illustrious vernacular. He is not writing these great poems in Latin, but he is using basic forms of Latin found in Rome, but that was no longer Rome, but Italy. Right? So he is using Italian language, which he calls illustrious vernacular, to spread the word of God to people. So when Milton is using English for writing his epic, he is using the model that was developed by Dante to talk about illustrious vernacular, and his illustrious vernacular is English, right? So you have to get vernacular is not a specific language but a position in society. So vernacular in India may be Gujarati, Marathi, Bangla, and the elite language is English or Sanskrit. But in Europe, English is not an elite language, it is a vernacular language. Language of slaves and servants. So Milton deliberately avoids using rhymes because for him that would have taken away seriousness of the poem. It has to be in elevated diction, right? It has to be illustrious vernacular. So you can see that even in Gujarati, Bhalan is using an illustrious vernacular, or Jnaneshwar is using illustrious vernacular. So there are parallels between European processes of vernacularization and something happening on Indian subcontinent, right? And what is the relationship between the two is very often a problematic issue. So on page 592, I will just cite this Doha and stop, and it goes something like this. A Doha which says idhar udhar ka 16 आना, page 582. इधर उधर का 16 ही आना, अठै कठै का 12, इकड़म तिकड़म अठानी आना, सूसा पैसा 4, which means in exchange, idhar udhar is Hindi, get 16 annas, that is the entire rupee. Athai kathai is Marwari for here and somewhere, gets 12 annas. Ikram tikram is Marathi, here and there, get 8 annas. But Susa, Gujarati, gets 4 paise only. That's the value of these regional languages before the advent of British in India. Right? This is the folk Doha. इधर उधर का 16 ही आना, अठाई कठाई का 12, इकड़म तिकड़म आठाई आना, सूसा पैसा 4. Has anyone heard of this Doha before? Okay, Preeti has heard. Where did you hear it?
So this was discussed in class, first semester, Allied Gujarati, Darshini ma'am.
So you had the same essay by Shitanshu?
Pardon?
You had the same essay by Shitanshu?
No, sir. We did not have this essay. In fact, the first year we had Gujarati Pranay Kavita for 2 semesters. So for that we had to go through history and then the different genres.
That shows the value of Indian languages on Indian subcontinent. That Hindi is like 1 full rupee. Marwadi comes second, Ikram Tikram comes third, and Susa Paisa 4. So Gujarati was held in low esteem in India even before English people came. So this low status of Gujarati seems to be a very old phenomenon, right? And that's why Premanand was so infuriated by this that he said that I will not tie my choti till I make Gujarati a very powerful language. So he went to Nandurbar and many places in the north to popularize Gujarati poetry, because he felt humiliated by this Doha. Okay, so with this we stop for today. You have to say something. Any comments, observations? Any idea why we have included this essay? Why are we studying it at all? Why are we studying history of Gujarati literature at all in English class? Any guesses? No guess.
Sir, I think like the democratization of the provinces was based on linguistic, not political, and and I think this province has a not I think of course it's a Gujarati language, which is linguistic based, and so we need to I think first look at our own situation, and then we can uh, make this whole comparative.
And if you to Shishir Kumar Das essay, he says that your study of Indian literature has to begin on a terra firma, a concrete language that you have, literature you have in front of you, right? It can be Bengali, it can be Gujarati, it can be Marathi or whatever. So because we are as a university based in Gujarat, our terra firma can only be Gujarati, right? That's the reason. Second is that आप लोग नेट स्लेट के लिए तो अब बहुत रट्टा लगाओगे इंग्लिश लिटरेचर का, तो थोड़ा बहुत ये भी पढ़ लो जो अपना है. That is also an idea.
Sir, I couldn't have guessed the reason, the exact reason, but it's not a surprise because we had history of Baroda for an entire semester in first year. So it's not surprising that MSU would prescribe something in the syllabus which talks solely about one language, our language, the local language.
Before NEP said, National Education Policy said that you should use local languages and local knowledge systems in your syllabus, we already had it in our papers before NEP was finalized and published. So we are ahead of our times, right? Okay, so tomorrow we will meet for comparative classes and translation studies classes, and those who have difficulties, Sezal and Vibha in particular, and if anyone else can bring those difficulties along for the first unit, because I want to sort those difficulties out before we move further. It shouldn't be that पहले का कुछ समझ में नहीं है तो आगे जाएंगे. So that would so before Sezal makes a presentation on you are making presentation, Sezal, on
Yes, sir. I and Naya are going to present.
so we will sort out whatever you have not understood in the earlier essays. So find out those things that you which have escaped you, right? So that we can clarify. This is for both Vibha and Sezal. Fine?
Sir, I have one more thing to add.
Yeah.
Like